Hello, and welcome to another episode of the AI ecosystem with myself, Lindsey DeFalco, and my lovely co host, Bob Moore.
Hey, good to hear, see, and everything else. Good to be back.
Yeah, awesome. And you were on quite the exciting work trip this week, right?
Yeah, we had our revenue kickoff was in Tulum, Mexico, and everybody landed from the leadership team on the morning when the cartel violence kind of broke out. Fortunately, we were on the East Coast, kind of on the peninsula. About a 30-hour drive away from where a lot of the activity was. There was enough going on and there was enough road blockages and kind of smaller incidents where we were that the State Department issued a shelter in place, which then caused all of our non-leadership arriving people, depending on when they departed, to kind of turn around and not be able to come. So we had this very fragmented half canceled, half held revenue kickoff at this resort in Tulum. And it's funny, like everybody from the US was getting sent terrifying headlines from CNN and Instagram posts from all their relatives, and everybody in Europe just didn't care. It's like it was totally fine. It was a very interesting, like, cultural thing that many things can be true at the same time, but I think those of us on the ground, fortunately, were never in situations where we felt directly unsafe. It was this fascinating thing where all the Americans were kind of like culturally predisposed to being very, very concerned. And it was pretty different than the reaction from people from other places, which is, we could probably have a whole podcast on that one.
Yeah. No shortage of excitement on offsite planning over here. I was also supposed to be there, so I was planning to be significantly more tan for this specific podcast, but alas, here we are.
I did
Um,
shave since I got back, but I think it was because of the sunblock in my beard was just like, it was untenable. So yes, this is a rare baby faced Bob we're getting today.
Straight from Tulum back into a blizzard on the
That's
East
right.
Coast. So cool. Okay. Awesome. So today we are going to spend some time talking about this article, think piece, this post that has been making its rounds, and it is by Citrini Research. And if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, it is called the 2028 Global Intelligence Crisis. And I found this particularly compelling because if you essentially follow the most pessimistic path of what's happening right now with AI, I think most people would reach a similar conclusion as is outlined in this article, but they do a really compelling job of walking through it by setting the stage of, hey, it's 2028 and this is the current state of the world and what's happened over the past 2 years. What I wanted to do is talk through some of the things in there. And I think it also connects really well to essentially a lot of what we talk about with what makes ecosystems interesting and how that shifts and what actually matters when there are less humans and more agents doing the work. So to tie it back to ecosystem things, that's like a sub thread I want to pull. But Bob, I'm curious. I know we were catching up a little bit about this, but you have not read this article, right?
That's right. I haven't. I think from what I've heard secondhand, they generally tend to agree with the most terrifying ultimate consequences here. I think it's very interesting to explore the journey between that terminal state and where we are today and what that looks like. I think it's going to be a great one to have a conversation on because I haven't read it. I don't necessarily know the details of where it gets to, but I know the details of where I think we're headed, and I'm curious to see how much that aligns.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so one thing that is really interesting to me right now with what is going on with AI and how it's actually impacting businesses and technology is, we live in the B2B world. And I think the B2B world specifically is a really good example of what might happen, particularly because unless you have one of the branches of a given network that actually touches into something that's B2C, then it's almost like this contained network where companies are building products for humans at other companies that are building products for humans at other companies. And it's this like contained kind of network where it feels like the humans are really just powering the shareholder value essentially for all these companies. And so my big question here, I'm really curious your take on this since you both invest in or a multi-time founder, is like, what does that actually all mean if it's all agents? Like if there's no humans in these companies and it's just agents talking to agents for agents to do things to talk to other agents, like What is that? Like, what does B2B even look like?
Yeah, I mean, and there's kind of a related question of like removing the humans and removing the agents and just going to like a raw first order, capitalist viewpoint. Why does anything B2B ever exist ever? Like, why is it there? Ultimately, the answer has to do with specialization to a certain extent. You can create a B2C business. There are these these human needs that exist, right? Where like people need to eat. And then you create a B2C business, which is you've got a cheeseburger shop. That's great. But then there's this thing that happens where your cheeseburger shop is successful and there's demand for it. And there are these kind of economic rules like economies of scale where it's actually easier for you to open a second cheeseburger shop than it is for somebody else down the road to open their first one. So you end up with this kind of aggregation of influence and economies of scale and economic work, et cetera. But then it becomes more logistically complicated to manage all the people it takes to cook the hamburgers and the importing and the procurement. And all of a sudden you realize that it's actually more efficient for you to buy a software product that is going to manage your employee timesheets than for you to kind of solve that from scratch. And, it's more efficient to buy the hardware of your cash registers than for you to go into the cash register manufacturing business. And it's more efficient for you to buy, the onions that you use on your cheeseburgers from a farm than for you to get into the farming industry. Now, if you get as big as someone like McDonald's, some of that goes out the window because you do actually own farms and you own the real estate and you probably are like, have a controlling stake in your cash register manufacturing company. But by and large, in the upward slope of the economy, the specialization in helping businesses be successful creates this very natural emergence of B2B companies where it's like companies that are built to serve other businesses. And if you can serve a lot of businesses with a specialized thing, you can offer a better deal to them all than they would get by figuring it out themselves. And then boom, you have a B2B company. But what happens is, especially in the information economy, you get into this weird thing where, all right, well, now the company that made the payroll software has to sell that payroll software to every single burger shop on the planet. And how do they do it? They hire a bunch of salespeople, and those salespeople are inefficient. So they need training, and that training is like software. So now the training software company only sells to a B2B company who then sells to B2C companies. Well, that training software company, they also need to sell their product, and they have their own means of going to market. And maybe that means of going to market is a partnership ecosystem and a bunch of resellers. And they want to share data across those partnerships, but not break any laws or jeopardize their own kind of walled gardens of data. How do they do that? Well, they buy something like Crossbeam in order to do it, right? So you've got like a B2B Crossbeam serving a B2B payroll company, serving a B2B whatever's in this ladder. And it ends up ultimately being in service of some value proposition to like humans at the end of the day. So I don't necessarily buy the thesis that a lot of these companies exist for the sake of creating jobs for people, but I think they do exist because people don't scale extremely well and they don't specialize. They don't anti-specialize. They don't work horizontally extremely well. So like human talent is a finite resource and humans are better generally at specializing than they are at becoming horizontally strong. So what you end up is, this very, very robust universe of companies that themselves are specialized at certain things. And that's kind of the world in which we live, especially in the information economy. So now what happens when AI comes in is like, hey, you can stamp out an infinite number of AI agents who are very specialized. So then that the scarcity of human talent goes away. But also they're pretty damn good at being like horizontally strong. So it kind of creates like a collapsing effect where things can get built a lot more quickly and efficiently because of the lack of human capital constraints, but also things make a lot more sense to be horizontally and vertically integrated with each other because there's not kind of an organic human resource capitalist emergence of innovation that happens better outside of these things than inside of these things. It almost could, I haven't thought of this before, but like, that old book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which like states all these
Mhm.
reasons companies are basically bad at innovating and building new things. It's funny. I wonder if you reread that book through the lens of AI, if all the reasons that get given for the innovator's dilemma ultimately reduce down to like the faultiness of humans and like the way humans organize and the way humans get work done in large numbers and the way humans think about and process risk and the costs of innovation. And like in a world of AI, the innovator's dilemma might go away. And if the innovator's dilemma goes away, do startups go away? And in the course of all that, people go away, which I think is probably like the main crux of this article. So my sense from your description of it is like the article is very centered around maybe a thesis that like a lot of these companies just exist to employ people. I don't actually agree with that, but I do agree with its conclusion, which is that I don't think we are going to need the people in maybe 2028 is an aggressive timeline, maybe not for like the tech end information economy, but that is the end state.
Yeah. And I think the point of those companies employing humans was my take. And potentially it's that in that world, that is their only value directly back to the humans in our society. So the thing that I find interesting is, you use McDonald's as an example, right? And if you sure, we all need to eat. That's more of like a requirement. But let's use Yeti or Stanley as an example here, right? Like or something that's even more premium. I'm looking around my room and can't come up with a great example here, but like you start getting into non-essential consumer companies and things that are more premium and what the article, and I guess I should have summarized it this, at the beginning. Essentially, what the article covers is like the collapse of the white collar workforce in America, and then what that does to the economy. So, I think it quotes in there that like the top 20% of earners in the U.S. are 65% of the consumers in in the economy. And so what does that mean? Like again, the McDonald's example I think tracks because it's like, oh yeah, people have to eat. And especially like more low cost food is probably in this scenario going to be a requirement for people. But when you start to get into consumer things that are more nice to haves, and the majority of your consumers were the humans at these companies that are now run by robots, I think that's where the whole economic impact and collapse comes into play that the article spends a lot of time talking about. And I think like that's interesting to me. And then also any networks, we talk a lot about, Bob loves to show like the crossbeam network graph, where it's basically this whole massive interconnected set of nodes and edges. And any like self-contained networks in B2B are interesting to me as well, because I cannot think how those make any sense to run in a world where there's no humans involved in them.
Yeah, there is a little bit of this like House of Cards thing in pure play, particularly in B2B SaaS. It's like a really interesting thing. And we suffered from this big time at Crossbeam in the first couple of years. And thankfully, it didn't we kind of made it out the other side. But if you looked at our customer base, um, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years into running the company, it was 98% venture-backed B2B SaaS companies whose own customers were also 98%
Exactly.
venture-backed B2B SaaS companies. And you do get into this very weird thing where like, is there value created? Sure. But if every single one of those companies is like running primarily on is burning capital, optimizing for growth, running on venture capital dollars. And then because it's burning capital, you're hiring a lot of people. And because you have a lot of people and a lot of ambitions, then you need all these like tooling and software and other kind of like rails on which to run on. Then you create this very scary illusion that you all need to exist because you are all growing really fast and you all have revenue. But ultimately, it's like the venture capital firm's LP base is like three billionaires in the Saudi government, right? And there are these massive pools of capital in search of access to innovation and other things. And they know that out of 100 VC investments, there's going to be one company that comes out that's like the next Google or the next like, major breakthrough business that actually jumps over that air gap. But everybody else is kind of left in this like in the house of cards that'll end up collapsing. It does feel like AI is like an accelerant of economic efficiency for those circumstances, which feels really bad to all the people working at those companies. Maybe feels like if I'm a cold-hearted like AI logic engine, maybe it feels good because you could argue that all those companies were just like wasting time and like handing like, left pocket, right pocket with the same dollar going around in a giant circle and no one was actually benefiting in society from it. But a weird artifact of it is that a lot of people got paychecks. So like that goes away and the paychecks go away.
And that
That's the point of this article, right? It's like,
yeah, and that fed the B2C economy, which in turn fed the same investors. So it's this interesting, like, uh, yeah, I think you're going to see this like big divergence in like B2C versus B2B and what AI actually does to that, especially in isolated B2B environments. And I think when they cross over, it gets more interesting. But you look at some software like knowledge management and ticketing software, for example, like those.
support tickets,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, or even like let's say you're building things and you're creating tickets, like, why do you need to
Mm.
write tickets if you're an agent that comes up with what to build and builds it? And those things are like very isolated to tech companies running and building tech things for other tech companies. Another interesting thing that I've noticed in having even conversations just about like how to implement AI internally, and obviously we talk a lot about like, oh, how does it change what your role looks like, or how does it change what the org design looks like, and the types of people you need to hire or not hire, is that, and I'm curious your reaction to this, but a lot of what we're doing right now also feels like we are building ourselves out of the picture. Like, there's a lot of ways that these technologies need to connect for this reality that's laid out, in this article and other think pieces to be true. And it's like in our adoption of AI, we're not only training AI to do these things, but we're also like coming up with ways for it to do it. And so it's this funny thing where sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like thinking about how to make my job better and the act of like product development better overall. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, we're designing solutions to like work ourselves out of jobs eventually.
we are. Yeah. No, we're in the midst of rolling out kind of company-wide standardized LLM access. Up until this point, everybody's kind of been like allowed to reimburse an assortment of tools and pretty heavily restricted on what data they can put into them. And we're kind of solving for that now. And part of that is getting as many people internally up to speed as possible on the ability to write concept of like Anthropic calls it like a skill. And it really is like a system query and a bunch of like sanctioned approved script libraries and other things that just allow for a standardization in how a particular task gets done. And you really are just kind of like, if you broke down your whole organization into just a giant list of jobs to be done, and then you build a skill around each of those jobs to be done, sooner or later you end up with the AI being able to do massive proportions or 100% of many of the jobs. But B, weirdly, as the AI is able to look at the skills that you have built for the first 80%, maybe it's the first 20% of the skills that exist internally, its ability to like intuit the best way to do the jobs to be done and even figure out what those jobs to be done are, or advocate for them being different or creating new ones, it's probably better than any of the employees at your company, and it'll just start writing its own skills. There does become this thing where like there's some baseline, this classic institutional knowledge thing that is part of like the human fabric of how companies run. And we're kind of instinctively, for the sake of being competitive and for the sake of being relevant, training AI on like the hairiest, stickiest bits of institutional knowledge that it couldn't infer from just reading our whole Google Drive or all of our Notion docs, creating that glue layer and, yeah, effectively skilling AI to a point where it raises really terrifying questions about the need for any of us to be doing those jobs anymore. And what jobs are left over to be done other than like, consuming AI generated videos and otherwise living a life of terrifying
Yeah.
leisure. Yeah.
Something I'm also interested in that has been coming up for me a lot as you and other people have been like vibe coding products in the company is like, historically, the easiest part of product development is always just creating the first thing, right? Like, you have no customers, you can build something, you can put it out there. You don't know that, like, my maiden name was O'Neill with an apostrophe, and one time when I was consulting, I was given an email that was Lindsey O'Neill with the apostrophe in it at whatevercompany.com, which
Yeah.
seemed logical for the person creating the email,
Yeah.
but
They
every
accidentally
single
created like a SQL injection attack
yeah, yeah.
in whatever thing they were running.
Every single email, thing failed. So anyway, stupid examples about like, you don't know what cases will come up and, there's validation, but I am still curious. And I know like a lot of this technology has been out for a while now, but not a lot of it has been operating at like massive enterprise scale for a while too. And so something I think about a lot is like assumptions baked into, this article and a lot of the discourse too. I'm trying to make it a little more optimistic right now, where we're making assumptions about how this will continue to operate at scale.
Yeah.
And the more we remove humans, we're talking more about like how this will continue to operate at scale without additional training, or like with I don't know, self training. So like robots training robots, but like there's a chance there that something really breaks down in a way that we can't anticipate, where this is all not as smooth and magical as it may
Yeah.
seem.
I totally agree, and I would say, and I'm deeply offended that you refer to anything I've done as vibe coding, by the way. And it actually it's germane to the point you're making, right? I'll tell you my point of view right now, and then I'll tell you why I doubt my point of view. So my point of view right now is anyone attempting to build a actual scalable, widely usable system for either internal or external consumption that does not have a fundamental understanding of how the infrastructure of the internet works and the best practices around code design thinks that they're doing something absolutely mind-blowing because it's probably 100x better than anything they could have done on their own anyway. But the thing
Yep.
that they are building is profoundly bad, full of weird assumptions, and ultimately is going to fail. And widespread deployment of those things is absolutely terrifying. And I'm not talking about like skills in Anthropic for you to be able to like, generate a PowerPoint presentation. I'm talking about like actual systems that have consequences around financial transactions that impact the way that people are persuaded, that are, kind of heavily customized to account for edge cases that need certain layers of security, et cetera. The reason I know this is because um, I am building a lot of stuff. And regardless of how extremely clear my initial attempts at prompting are, at the end of the day, me steering the outputs and the direction and the instincts of even like the current Anthropic Claude Opus model, which is like as good as it gets from like an engineering standpoint, my oversight of that is absolutely critical. And I I have not built anything that has been worth its weight and worth the tokens created without spending days or weeks of time on that refinement and oversight process. And look, I just built a thing like an efficiency tool for our sales reps to allow them to like really, really heavily customize their demo environments while giving demos. It- The way I implemented that thing no doubt would have taken me over a year. I'm not exaggerating, over a year of like dedicated full time as my whole job for a year. I did it in about 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks, it was like a pretty full 2 weeks, right? And like I'm kind of doing it nights and weekends, and like I unfortunately have other jobs to like to do around here. But I was so fascinated by it and moving at such high velocity that I was kind of just like on top of the agents and constantly reviewing and just like pushing the ball forward. And yeah, like net, it was probably something on the order of like 30 to 60 hours of my time to get this thing done, to get this year's worth project, this like 80,000 hour thing. Well, uh, that's great, but the knowledge of like my 20-year career in building technology and information systems and my degree in computer science and all that stuff is really, really, really fundamentally important to this being something I'm comfortable deploying out to the team, right? So like there is a huge gap, even as impressive as this stuff is, when it comes to like, it's kind of like the AI video stuff from last week. Like you need to have taste, like taste and good ideas end up being really critical. And then like implementation details and an ability to anticipate edge cases and like behavioral abnormalities that might happen around these things is still like just massive. And it's not done automatically by any of these things, right? So that like my near term, you could just say, uh, it's not good enough. And you really do need people. But here's why I hate saying that, because to me, I sound like the person that's like, hey, I asked OpenAI how many R's are in the word strawberry, and it said 2. It's dumb. And like, yeah, that was a thing, for 5 minutes, 9 months ago. You think we're ever going to see that problem again? And not just because it's like a hard coded if statement, because like it has been systematically rooted out in like the nature of the way that logic happens inside of these things. Like everything that I'm describing, it will get better, and it's getting better so incredibly quickly that I don't want to underestimate that my concerns are just like not concerns anymore in less than a year.
Mhm.
But B, think about all the things I described that you need to account for. All these edge cases, all these strange behavioral like abnormalities in the way the thing might get consumed and interpreted. These are all intrinsically human behaviors, right? Like I built a tool for our sales team to be used by sales reps to like customize the appearance of content that is being demoed to other humans who might want to see like weird edge casey stuff in the demo. The amount of humans involved, it's like it's like a productivity layer for humans demoing to humans because they want to sell stuff to human consumers. And if you march forward, it may also be true that a lot of like the personas or the things that you're trying to optimize for by writing this code that the LLMs are still bad at actually become less and less important because maybe the consumers on the other end are just other agents. So like I can't like sit on team, hey, this stuff is hard and it's never going to get all the way there, because everything I've ever had that instinct about or had a conversation with somebody about and rolled my eyes, like it has always proven true that the AI has gotten their way faster than anybody expected.
Yeah, and I think that's like the big underlying question that, this article and similar ones pose is like, are we underestimating, overestimating, or like estimating how good AI is going to be at this stuff? And that's where like a lot of because yeah, it's interesting. The problems that we face today in building technology and using technology are not even, it's not even in the same class of problem that we may face in a few years. And it's like there's so many underlying assumptions to how we think about things. Like, I was going to say in response to your standing up of the demo tool, once you launch it internally, you're going to get a whole slew of feedback about it, right? And then it's like, what do you do with that feedback and how do you use that feedback? And that's like a current SaaS problem. And like maybe the answer is you feed it to an agent that tries to form an opinion about whether or not to fix something, how to fix it, et cetera. I do still think that's like an area where there's still some taste built in currently and like how to update things. But then if we step forward a couple years, then like is all of that gone because like the way that procurement happens is totally different, or the need for a UI for that certain persona is gone or different. So it's
Yeah,
like
it's a I tell you what, and to put some, like a real concrete example on it, I'll tell you, this happened to me today because on that demo thing, this thing is really just like, it's a Chrome extension that like completely overrides and interprets all the API responses coming from the back end of Crossbeam so that when you're demoing it in our fake demo account, it can like make the data way customized and more rich without us actually mucking around with the physically stored data in the back end of our demo account.
pretty
So reps
sick.
can like do crazy, crazy customization, right? So, one of the first pieces of feedback I got was from our solutions architect, Gadali, who said, hey, it would be really cool if when you go into an account mapping report, if all of the overlap times were like really recent. If it was like this morning, this overlap happened, and 2 days ago, that overlap happened. The current demo as it stands, because of the way the data is structured, all of them say that they happened on the same day, like 4 years ago. It's like absolutely terrible in the current demo, as many things before the Chrome extension. So I was like, this is great. I literally copy pasted Gadali's exact Slack and just sent it directly into Claude Code in that repo, which had a little pre-existing context about how it works from some other fixes I had done recently. I just dropped it in and it was like, awesome idea. I'll get right on it. It found, the right thing to make the substitution. It built a little algorithm for kind of like deterministically substituting so that if it said 3 days ago, it's always going to say 3 days ago the next time you bring the demo up. So it's not like confusing to sales reps. And it said, done. This is awesome. Ship it. And I loaded it up in the demo environment and it did what it was supposed to do. However, it didn't anticipate that there's an ability to sort that exists on the UI. And that sorting is actually conducted via a SQL query in the backend. So now that it had these substituted values, if you hit the sort button, it would not sort logically because all the stuff coming back had these randomly assorted substituted values based on this like deterministic substitution function. So I had to go back and like explain, it's like, there's your edge case, by the way. It's very logical that if you're looking at an account mapping report, you want to sort by what has overlapped the most recently. It's probably something that's going to be demoed now that we have these cool values in there. And yet when people hit it, it's actually going to look like a bug in our software. So I had to tell it that this is no good. And then it went and thought and probably like, boiled the ocean, burning tokens and charging me money, trying to come up with a solution. And the solution just wasn't that smart. And I ended up having to tell it like the idea for you have this deterministic mapping. You basically need to look at what's in the results and make your deterministic mapping conform to like the same sequentialness that exists in the underlying data set. So like if it said 3 years ago, it should be 3 seconds ago. If it said, whatever. So that the order is always the same. So that when it sorts in the back end and it comes back, boom, in the front end, it's going to look good. And it was like, that's a great idea. Let me implement that. And then it burned a bunch more tokens and it did it and I shipped it. But like, I think a lot of like the vibe coding stuff that gets done, you stop at that first thing. Because Claude is like sycophancy. It's telling you that the thing's done and it's awesome and you had a great idea. And it literally tells you like in the suggested completion, like auto completion thing that exists, Claude Code does this very like nefarious thing where it pre-completes for you phrases like, great, push it. And phrases like merge or create MR, merge request. And these are all things to get the developer to like, just kind of like, blindly like let the thing go out the door. And it's always wrong. Like it's never right on the first take. And this would be a bug that wouldn't get noticed until this is deployed out there and all of our reps are using it, and suddenly all the demos are going sideways, right?
Mhm.
So like that's the layer today.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I think that's like the biggest. I mean, we're both like deeply involved in what developing products actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. I think if you talk to engineers, depending on the engineer, they will have like just a very seemingly arrogant take on AI and its capabilities. And I say seemingly arrogant because right now I don't think it's arrogant at all. I think there's like a ton of knowledge that exists in, like you said, how to architect systems, having the right opinion on how to solve something based on your entire knowledge of the code base, the intended behavior, your business, the importance of the thing, the timeline, like all of that stuff. There's so much that goes into it. And I think, yeah, that's like to me, that's like the big interesting and kind of, if I were to be scared, scary word is like, when does it get good enough that it's doing that? Cause I've had the same experience with, and I will call mine vibe coding. Any vibe coding that I've done is like, I too have a computer science degree and a technical background and was an engineer. And I find it doing things that I know that people that aren't technical would just breeze over or not understand the impact of it. Or it's throwing errors and you have to go into the code to fix the errors because it doesn't know that some variable doesn't exist and it doesn't understand why it's not working. And like, sure, we can get past a bunch of that stuff, and so it's interesting to me where, like, a lot of this knowledge will be taken care of, and then a lot of it will remain taste, because a lot of architecture is taste, and it's just more technical taste, but, like, it is taste, and I think it's in some industries, this will matter. We were talking about this a little bit in Slack, I think, like, sure, maybe in our industry, nobody gives a shit. Oh, is there an explicit filter on this, podcast? Nobody
I want to test it out.
maybe nobody cares, right? Because we're not saving lives. Um, but you get into healthcare, you get into things that are touching things that have humans involved in their livelihood. It matters a lot more. So, yeah, all things that we
No,
don't have answers to, but
it is. I will say it's just like it's very interesting. We talked so much on the video episode last time about taste and like how I follow so many people doing all this like vibe coding stuff, and like I I just come back to like how profoundly bad and redundant and deductive so many of these like ideas are, and I think this is why the adoption and innovation and deployment of AI is happening so much more successfully and quickly in our customers who are larger enterprises than it is in our customers who are startups, which is the exact opposite of what I was expecting at the beginning.
that's
Like
very
I was,
true. Yeah.
oh my God, all of our like connector customers that have 20 employees are going to like go AI crazy, and they're going to want the MCP server, and they're going to want all this stuff. And like, um, they're all like wrapped around the axle trying to build some next better mousetrap, cram AI into their own story in some way, and like just like completely disoriented by it all. But the enterprises have actual applications that they can solve for because they have all these things that require glue layers in between them that technology used to be too slow or too expensive to use to solve, or too custom. And so you've got all these, billable hours from consulting firms and like, contract employees and other things filling in these gaps that can all be completely replaced now with what exists now. Because what exists now is better than an employee without context. Look, if an employee without context was going to be building that Chrome extension thing, it also would not have known that you could sort by that column. And in a lot of large enterprises, you have a lot of that institutional knowledge gap that's no worse or better than the institutional knowledge that than an LLM will like show up on the job with. The LLM learns the hell of a lot faster. So like the uses inside of enterprises are actually much more tangible and practical and interesting, and there's an immediacy to them that in these smaller companies just like isn't true. And then uh the people in these smaller companies are just like, for every good idea out there, and there's a lot of good ones, there's 1,000 that are just like, the token consumption is going nowhere because this code's never going to see the light of day, and if it does, no one's ever going to use it.
And I think there's a lot of like with enterprises too, there's a lot of specialized internal processes and knowledge that need to be handled that like more generic SaaS tools can't do very well. And so you think about, for instance, like there's all these different AI productivity things. Like, sure, I could like vibe code any number of tools to help me be more efficient at various parts of my role. But there's a lot of instances where it's just not worth it for me because the team is so small. And so, like, do I want to spend 20 hours a week to get like automatic updates on a set of projects across 3 people, 4 people on my team? Or do I just want to like send them all a message, say hi, and ask them for an update once a week? Like, there are cases where it literally just doesn't make sense, but you scale that out to, okay, I've got 10 teams and 50 PMs. That makes a lot more sense. And so
But yeah.
I think it's like a lot of what we're seeing too is the like the specific processes. A lot of them have, bespoke internal tools there to use, and like the connective tissue within orgs that size is a really great use case for all these custom AI implementations.
Yeah, it's fair. It is, it gets back to our original conversation about like these companies are just, they're very pure problems and solutions. And then scaling is like glued together by humans who
Mhm.
hold institutional
Yep.
knowledge and who kind of like just like fill in these gaps in like the faulty humans that are consuming the stuff and the faulty humans that are delivering the stuff. And when you get into a problem, you just like glue more humans on, and occasionally have some technology that solves for the other, universe of issues.
Something
And that's gonna flip. Yeah.
Yeah, and something just popped into my head, which is like, because you keep talking about faulty humans, right? But like AI is faulty and machines are faulty, and so I'm
Yeah, I know.
wondering.
There's only two R's in strawberry. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it is curious because like, is there something here about the fact that people have a higher tolerance for AI being wrong because they don't have to manage them in any other way? They can just tell them there's wrong. There's zero feelings involved, zero. Like, I wonder how much of that is the human management around it that makes people more open to saying like, "Oh, it's fine if the AI is wrong," and we're not talking
Hell
about.
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is such a real thing. Like the books that have been written, the business school degrees that have been issued based on like being able to motivate and advance people and organize people and part ways with people that are underperforming and recognize people that are performing, but don't Peter principle them where you recognize them too far too fast and they get they get above their skis, and like this whole art of management, it, it kind of gets thrown to the wind because AI doesn't have feelings. At least we sure hope not, because there's a lot of us yelling at it on a frequent basis.
Yeah, that's
I'm oddly polite. I think most people are like oddly
yeah.
polite.
People are terrified and polite.
Yeah, and I don't think it's coming out of like one day a robot's gonna knock on my door and be like, "Hey, you called me an idiot back in 2025. It's time to pay the piper." I think it's just like an instinctively human, like, I feel ick when I'm like too direct with AI, but man, is it easy to say, you are completely off base here and here's the reasons. And man, have I maybe never uh, phrased something exactly like that to someone that I manage in my whole career, right?
Yep.
Uh, so the efficiency in that, the ruthless efficiency in that communication, and the ruthless efficiency with which you can kind of like make substitutions in ownership and responsibility. You can even swap out. Look, there's different models that cost different amounts of money, and they're varyingly good, right? So it's the equivalent of like bringing in the engineer versus the senior engineer versus the staff engineer, depending on what model you want to pay for, and like taking somebody off a project and putting another person on and like the politics of that and all kinds of other stuff. And it's like, why don't you just type slash model and like toggle? Um, yeah. So there are fields, right? And entire like categories of work product that are built around this human glue layer that I don't know what become of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's almost like one of the more depressing parts to me because, like, I mean, I work where I work. I do what I do because I enjoy the people. Like, that's my primary driver for choosing companies, staying at companies, investing my time and energy into companies. It's this interesting thing where, like, unfortunately, I think most people do not like human management. If you talk to leaders, I don't know if there's probably been studies done. I don't know what the percentage is, but I can see that being a big driver in the different degrees of adoption of it is essentially like getting rid of the burden of human emotion, which is like a really depressing statement to make. I don't think that's like a good thing, but I think it's like a potential reality.
And it's very, maybe that's a good like transition statement because there's this weird meta thing that I think is going on right now where I think every manager in the world is becoming a better communicator and a more on top of it manager because of AI.
Well,
Like
interesting. Say
the way
more.
in which managers need a lot of coaching and they need coaching on in very real time, and they need coaching on very sensitive subjects where you can really not confer necessarily with many people in the world who have both the context and the ability to have privacy and that you can be vulnerable with and you can explore different fears and outcomes and conversation paths with. And AI is like such an incredibly powerful solver for that. It's dangerous because it always tells you what you want to hear and says you're doing a great job, but it actually like when even pressed just a little bit, I think does like a pretty good job of telling you about ways this could go south or, things you might not have thought about in certain challenging conversations. And I think whether it's the actual like active management toward a solution of a problem or an underperforming employee or a tough conversation with somebody, all the way to the efficiency aspects of consolidating and writing annual reviews, and like the bureaucratic pieces of it, and like how many managers spend how much time like approving expense reports and other things that now like Ramp or whatever will just do automatically for you. All of these things I think lead to a lot of efficiency in the manager role and lead to managers having the ability to be better at their jobs by and large and handle things better and hopefully make the employees that they manage more productive as well. And it's because of AI in that role. And this gets back to the same thing of like the jobs to be done, right? Like the right now, and I think probably we see the tip of the spear in this in the technology and information industries. I think a lot of other more traditional industries are pretty far behind on this. But in this weird period in the next couple of years, I actually think it's going to get weirdly better before it all burns to the ground in terms of what's outlined in this paper, because there will be a period of time where we actually see these incredible efficiency gains without removing a lot of these folks. And like, don't get me wrong, we see the headlines like there's the jobs are going away already, but I think there's some that's disproportionately in the tech industry. I don't think that it necessarily needs to be or is supposed to be. I think it's because the tech industry is just a little bit further ahead, and maybe even a little bit of like trying to make the future come true before it's ready to come true and just like shooting first and asking questions later about reducing the amount of human overhead. And it likely will all kind of catch up. I don't think those companies are wrong in the aggregate, but like there's a period of time here where stuff like a Chrome extension to customize your demo environment and do way better demos is going to be like, hell, that's great news. That's a thing I've wanted in my job for the last 3 years, and it's gonna like make me more successful in my job, and I can maybe win 1 or 2 more deals a quarter, and that means I can carry more quota, and that means my company can be more efficient and close more business and grow faster without getting rid of my job, or without doing something majorly structural such that the idea of my job ceases to exist and you have to find something else for me to work on. And in that same way, like managers will become better managers and create better outcomes because AI is going to like assist and accelerate their jobs. And there's this assumption that you take that to its logical extreme and like you just don't need the person anymore. And I think that is the extreme this paper postulates, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. Like it's pretty clear to like draw those dots on that line and get to that endpoint. But that's not where we are today. I think where we are today is for people able to harness these skills. I think we have a little window of time here where there's like incredible productivity and performance and outcome gains that can show up. And on some days, it can actually be really like make your job more interesting than it used to be. And dare I say, more fun for certain folks in certain roles. But you can't help but feel like that meme where like the world's on fire and you're just standing there saying everything is fine with a smile on your face.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things there I wanted to touch on when you were talking about, like, the AI making better managers too. Another it was I thought that was interesting because my point was, like, that dealing with human emotion is something that AI abstracts if you're dealing or takes away if you're dealing with AI instead. And I think the flip side of that you were talking about is, like, that obviously managers and leaders have that emotion too. And that a big part of our jobs is also ensuring that, like, a lot of the time we're making sure sometimes you need to have some of your fervor in a decision, but taking your own personal emotion uh, out of like assessments and decisions as well is something that it helps do. And like you said, something that, maybe you needed some external person where you'd have to catch them up on the context, or they're not allowed to have all the context. So that's another thing too that I've found, and actually that I've used like Chat GPT a lot for myself, is if I'm really wrapped up in something and I think it's like more of an emotional argument, whether or not it's like me purchasing another bag or another keyboard or something. It's like, okay, let's go. Let's take my like feelings about how excited I am about it out of it, and let's like look at the facts. So yeah, I like that you called out the flip side. And then yeah, I think it is like, it's funny because, yeah, we're having fun in the meantime. And at the same time, like the most pessimistic version of that is that we're having a great time, like building for our downfall and like literally building ourselves out of jobs.
No,
Uh
I think in that meme, I forget what that dog is doing, but I feel like he might be holding a gas can, or at least like in a variation of that meme. There's like
what meme are you talking about?
fine, hold on, I'll share screen. Everything is fine.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's holding
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
coffee
Oh,
cup.
yeah, yeah. No, he's not. He's sipping a cup of coffee. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
but same idea. Yeah, it's
Yeah, the "This is fine" meme with the dog at the table and everything's on fire, uh, sipping some coffee. Yeah, I know the one.
yeah. It's here's 10,000 different versions of it.
Yeah, there it
Um,
is. This is fine.
yeah. But it
I don't
is a
actually
little
know
bit
where that came
like
from.
I feel like there's maybe a more appropriate one that exists where yeah, it's like the person
I get what you're
responsible
saying.
for the thing is also
Yeah,
kind of like basking in the thing, ignoring the consequences of it. Yeah.
yeah. And then I think, like, it feels like we're coming to, like, a natural conclusion here. I think, like, another thing
What
I
the
take
hell is that conclusion?
the not related to the meme.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Not arriving at a thought conclusion, but the end of this podcast is coming. So you're saying you need more ways than one.
I was trying to smoothly wrap up the podcast, but, Bob just threw a whole wrench in that. Uh, no, I think the thing that I found the most interesting about, like, and, there've been a few different think pieces like this. I forget what the other one was, like, it was 2030 something. But it's like, sure, there's a really pessimistic angle you can take, and there's, like, a more optimistic angle you can take, but, like, at the end of the day, I think we just don't know. And, there's the whole question of like, remember those old warnings at the beginning of movies that are like, you wouldn't pirate a car, and then like someone 3D printed a car. It's like a world you can't even imagine. And so it's like, we don't know where and how human interaction is still going to be incredibly important, and what those opportunities are. And maybe they're not even opportunities that we like are even, part of our vocabulary or mind right now.
Yeah.
And I think about how, I probably would have said, "Oh, I'd never buy a car or a house without a human," but a lot of people are buying, like, new construction houses without humans involved. People buy Teslas every day. Those things are a reality, and so, that's the big thing I take away from this is, like, sure, maybe this is the most pessimistic, future where there's, like, a total collapse of the entire, at a minimum, white collar class in America, but also maybe everything changes in a way that we can't even see right now, and everything just looks different than it does now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where you like, there's two different versions of that future. One of them is like this incredible societal collapse, and one of them is like the movie Wall-E, where
Wasn't that societal collapse?
yeah, yeah. Hey, wait a minute. Oh no, there's only one outcome. No. Well, look, I'm picturing the humans that are left in Wall-E that are like sitting in chairs that drive them around, that are being like force fed, sugary goo all day, and just basically have a TV screen in front of their face constantly, immediately, and also like on the walls of the room they're in, just in case they look away. But that's also some other screen that's portraying some reality that they're not actually in, or it's like it's almost like the idiocracy thing to a certain extent, where like humans have just forgotten all of this very, very important core knowledge, and that's okay because the robots are there to kind of coddle them on and keep them pacified. And that's where it's like, what's left to do, or to feed the part of all of our brains that actually really, really values being productive and being valued and being useful. especially for those of us that gravitate toward that stuff for whatever reason, and probably cause us to end up in that information economy and putting our restless energy into our work. Um, it's a bleak future for
I
those
thought you were
folks.
gonna get optimistic, but that just
No.
got even darker.
Look, it's optimistic if you love like sugary food and Netflix. Like, imagine a Netflix where, it will just like feed you exactly what you want to see all the time, 24 hours a day, and you never run out of new stuff. And maybe you don't even need that much sugary food because you're on like a state mandated GLP-1, and you just kind of like need to consume fewer calories, so we don't have to worry about food supply as much. Should I keep going?
Yeah, and on that note,
Yeah. This has been the AI ecosystem. I'm glad we got to talk about partnerships and and all that stuff today. Look, uh,
you can't even think of an optimistic thing to say.
yeah, look, I'm actually extremely optimistic about the next like 1 to 2 years.
There we
And
go.
I'm pretty damn worried about what comes after that. But I don't know that any of us are able to actually see that far, because of the number of variables at play. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess go, touch some grass, take a walk, enjoy nature.
Smoke and crack.
I will say, I think one of the biggest dangers of all this stuff is not paying attention and like being arrogant about it. And so I do think it's important to talk about like the most pessimistic scenarios, the maybe more optimistic scenarios. Don't go to Bob if you want to talk about those, and anything in between. So thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yeah. Hey, take
Definitely.
a Crossbeam demo if you haven't in a while, and you can see the cool Chrome extension at work. How's that for a plug?
There you go. Hashtag ad.
That's right.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
everybody. Till next time. See ya.
Bye.